I'm going to play some audio for you. This is from a Galactic History from Ashayana Dean.
Nibiruan electrostatic transduction field. It's another one of these nasty little technologies that you could use nicely if you wanted to. They've literally been able to seal the frequencies, literally put us in a frequency bubble where guardian races progressively could not get through the net to communicate here or to get their ships in here. This net has been a nemesis to our planet since 25,500 BC. It's also how they broadcast stuff. The net is linked through the Nibiruan dotted crystal grid into natural configurations called crystal temple networks. There's 24 primary crystal temple networks in the planetary grids that were always there. Way back in seeding 1, millions of years ago, when Nibiru at the time was under Emerald Covenant protection, and they were trying to work with the Anunnaki races who were trying to be supposedly nice at the time, there were something called Nibiruan crystal rods put into these 24 primary areas of crystalline caverns. They created a communication system, and it was used for interplanetary communication, and it was used to generate certain types of energy, and it made a link to Nibiru. Well, when they put the Nibiruan dotted crystal grid in the third seeding in 25,500 BC, they wired it in to this old communication network, and they got control of the 24 primary bases. They're literally crystal temples, like in the picture that's on the front of that. I don't have the other pictures of it that Leela had, but they're gorgeous. These are massive crystalline caves filled with salt.
Think of those big selenite caves, and they discovered it after she's been talking about this in the 90s, and I believe it was like 2000, they discovered that huge selenite cave. Anyway, this is what she's talking about.
Night rods and some others. Once they had control of those, they had control of Earth's planetary Templar grids, which means they could control what frequency was going to run in the grids, and they would also be able to control what the stargates did once a star activation cycle.
This makes so much sense.
Happened. What they planned to do, that was 25,500 BC when they got all this mess set up. What they planned to do, the next stellar activation cycle from that point was supposed to be in 22,326 BC. They were going to do their final takeover then and bring the whole thing down into Phantom Matrix then. But our guys stopped it. They were able to do, I don't know what they did, but they did something with the gates, with Sirius B, Gate 6, that shut down the stellar activation cycle before it fully commenced. Because once it starts to commence and you get one of the gates fully open, you can't stop it, or it can actually rip the grids apart, not just create pole shift. There was a partial pole shift during that period of time, and because we got attacked. I mean, we were coming in to do the Christos mission to get that finalized. They were coming in to make sure we got sucked down into the Phantom Matrix, and the whole thing got put on hold.
Do you understand what she's saying? And that's what's going on now. This is exactly what's going on now.
Stalemate. This would all be resolved during the next stellar activation cycle. The next stellar activation cycle that will come due is now 2000 to 2017. So we've had these messes to deal with. Then in 10,500 BC, various other ones started to put in the APIN systems, which would tap in. They made the wormholes in 10,500 BC. This is when they literally made wormholes, or let's say made doorways through that wall in time that I talked about. They ripped holes in the wall in time, wormholes, so they could start, so the different groups could start coming back and forth. They made the 2 wormholes. That's when the Nibiruan dotted crystal grid system in the net became just one of the problems. Once the wormholes were in, all these APIN systems were put in, and they were like little landmines waiting to go off in the next stellar activation cycle. These are literally planted in our grids, and they are starting to activate because we're in a stellar activation cycle. What we've seen in the last, since 1916, has been a progressive covert war over whose APIN system was going to activate, therefore who was going to control the planetary grids when the stargates started to open. Okay, the Toth Enki group is, these guys are interesting. They're part of the Anu Seraphim. Now, we talked about Anu Elohim, which are the Jehovian Anunnakis, are pure strain Anu Elohim. Anu Seraphim means they were Anunnaki that hybridized with some of the draconian races from the fallen Seraphim group. So they're part Anu Elohim and part Anu Seraphim. So they call them and part fallen Seraphim. So they call them Anu Seraphim. The Anunnaki races that are affiliated with this line were, their natural body form was an aquatic ape. That means they could breathe land. They were like a land or water ape. They could breathe water as well. The Toth group, the Toth Enki group, were hybridized with the Zeta, which are the Zeta regalian insectoid reptilian things. It's like, when you look at a regalian, they're basically insectoid reptilian serpent template. That's what that race is, if you were going to try to describe what it is. So the Toth Enki groups are the aquatic ape plus that Zeta insectoid reptilian serpent thing. They had their IPN system, it was called the Serpent, that runs literally down the East Coast and down Central America and down into South America. These guys were totally, they were involved with all sorts of stuff. If we go...
I did say about Thoth on the East Coast. This makes so much sense. I'm going to let her finish this up, and I'm going to wrap this up and keep it short.
Back in Egyptian history, these were the guys who did the Sirius, Isis, Horus Egyptian lines. Most of our Egyptian history isn't human history. This is about the Leviathan races being controlled by the fallen angelic races who came in and took over the non-dynastic kings, because the whole dynasty system, the way it was structured in Egypt, was a total Anunnaki construct. There had been people, the Magi king lines, that were there before, and Imhotep was actually like one of the last ones that actually had a name that you might recognize from somewhere. He was not just an architect, he was actually, he was a king, and he was taken over by Djoser. That's when the invasions really started to pick up. So when you look at our wonderful, everybody goes, oh, we need Egyptian history, and because we all have a feel that we might have a part of ourselves there. And this is like this romanticism about it. If we only knew, it's not half as romantic as we might think. When we think about, Sirius and Isis and Horus, and we study maybe the ancient mystical teachings of Isis and the girls of Isis. Who are these people? They're Anunnaki. Okay, these guys are associated with the Toth schools, the Paracletes, the Atlanteans, the Alpha Omega Order, Melchizedek. There's a whole bunch of them that are actually working with the other Alpha Omega guys that are from Alpha Omega Centauri, the Necromaton. These guys work with the Necromaton. They also work with just about anybody that it's convenient to work with at the time to get them where they want to. Now, there's another group called the Enlil Odedicron Anunnaki. The Toth group are from Nibiru, so are the Enlil Odedicron Anunnaki. The Enlil Odedicron Anunnaki are different shaped. They have the aquatic ape Anunnaki base, but they also have the avian reptile form. So their coding is a little bit different. It's not the Zeta form. It's the Odedicron avian reptile form. These guys are from Nibiru and also Tiamat. Okay, if we're going to go, most of these are located on Nibiru now, and Nibiru is the one that dips in and out of the Phantom Matrix because they have it on an artificial orbit. There's also a planet called Tiamat.
I'm going to end that there because I want to just do it on Tiamat.